Well, hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Northend Church Online. My name is Mitch Hunter. I'm the youth director around here, and I'm so glad you've decided to join us this morning. You can see behind me the remnants of a past kids camp just took place this last Wednesday. We're looking ahead to all sorts of future ministries, revamping old ones, starting new ones. A lot of cool stuff going on in this building, and right now the auditorium, I know you're not here with me, but I'll tell you, it smells like a nice, like some pine trees or maybe like a fall morning. A lot of great stuff going on around here, folks. We've got a great service in store for you. Our very own Mike Sherbino is continuing the series. It's week 2 where we look at the Beatitudes called Life's Healing Choices. A lot of great stuff in store, folks. We're glad you're with us.
Hey, welcome Northend family to our summer series called Life's Healing Choices. It's a series of 7 weeks where we're going to be unpacking the Beatitudes. Jesus' amazing teaching that kind of is like the upside down way of thinking about life. I think especially as we come through COVID, we're all reevaluating life. We're reevaluating what's important. We're wondering what is it that really matters. And we all have to make choices, don't we? Join us over the next 7 weeks as we unpack key choices that will shape your life, not just for now, but for a destiny, for eternity. We're glad you're with us at Northend Church.
All right, go ahead and join us standing in worship this morning if you're able. Come on your feet. Let's sing to our God.
I don't know if you were able to either download them or got them on your phone or whatever, but maybe you know some of these and you'll catch on to them. Just praise God this morning for His goodness. Praises rising, eyes are turning to you. We turn to you. Hope is stirring, hearts are yearning for you. We long for you. When we see You are the God who saves us, worthy of all our praises. Amen. Amen. Oh, we have a beautiful day. Praise God for the day that He has given to us, that we have this privilege to meet here, even amongst the pandemic. We're so thankful that things are starting to lift. But it reminds me of how God is the same today, yesterday, and forever, no matter what's going on. And when we look around, Paul talks about in the beginning of Romans that the very creation points to God and ultimately to Jesus. It's totally indescribable how amazing God is.
The depths of the sea, creation's revealing your majesty. From the colors of fall to the fragrance of spring, every creature unique in the song that it sings. We're all exclaiming, indescribable, uncontainable. You place the stars in the sky and you know them by name. You are amazing, God. You are all-powerful, untamable. Awestruck, we fall to our knees as we humbly proclaim. You are amazing, God. Who's told every lightning bolt where it should go, or seen heavenly storehouses laden with snow? Who imagined the sun and gave source to its light, yet conceals it to bring us the coolness of night. No, none can fathom, indescribable, uncontainable. You place the stars in the sky and you know them by name. You are amazing, God. Sing, you are all-powerful, untamable. Awestruck, we fall to our knees as we humbly proclaim. You are amazing, God. Indescribable, uncontainable. You place the stars in the sky and you know them by name. You are amazing, God. You're incomparable, unchangeable. You see the depths of my heart and you love me the same. You are amazing, God.
We're going to sing that one more time. Indescribable.
You are indescribable, uncontainable. You place the stars in the sky and you know them by name. You are amazing, God. Oh, you are incomparable, unchangeable. You see the depths of my heart and you love me the same. You are amazing, God. You see the depths, oh God. Yes, you see the depths of my heart and you love me the same. You are amazing, God.
You give life, you are love, you bring light to the darkness, you give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. And great are you, Lord. Sing that again. You give life, you are love, you bring light to the darkness, you give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. And great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. We praise you, Lord. Yeah. Let's focus on that. You give life, you are love, you bring light to the darkness, you give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. And great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, we pour out our praise. It's your breath in our
Well, folks, it's about that part in the service where someone tells you what's going on. Chelsea, what are you up to?
I'm just typing up the announcements for this Sunday.
Man, we've got announcements going on right now. People are watching. Come on over.
Oh, no. Whoops.
All right, Chelsea, tell us a bit about what is going on with kids.
Well, I want to give our church community and family a little bit of an update about this past Wednesday. This past Wednesday, we ran our first ever Northend camp in a day in the building. We had 15 campers right here at the church for a full day of camp fun. It was amazing. We had kids have fresh and new encounters with Jesus, and it was just so evident that his presence was in this building, in those kids. If you haven't already registered your kids, register them today at northendchurch.ca/events. We hope to see you there.
Well, that's what's going on with the kids ministry up to grade 5, and I guess there's nothing going on grade 6 to 8. But that's not entirely true now, is it? Ready? 1, 2, 3. NJY! What is that? I'll tell you. Northend Junior Youth, grade 6 to 8. In the past, we've had Chelsea taking care of folks up to grade 5. You've had me taking care of folks grades 9 to 12. Nothing for grades 6 to 8 until now. Chelsea, tell me some more.
So, Junior Youth, we are talking directly to you right now. So, we are planning to launch Junior Youth in September, but we are excited to announce that we are going to be doing the prequels to the launch this summer. So Tuesday, July 27th from 6:30 until 8 o'clock, we're going to be having our first ever Junior Youth, that's both boys and girls in grades 6 to 8 event here at Northend Church. And stay tuned for more details.
Now, you're thinking to yourself, Mitch, that's all well and good, but I've already finished high school. I'm a young adult. What is there for me? Let me tell you. So Wednesday, July 21st, and every following Wednesday for the summer, we're going to be having basketball in the parking lot. We're going to be having a barbecue in the parking lot. Folks, it's going to be a great time to come out, to connect, to meet with folks who are in similar stages of life as you. I know a lot of the interns are excited. I'm excited. If you know people who are in that age range, young adults, let them know. Wednesday, July 21st, in the parking lot, 7 o'clock, going to play basketball. We're going to have a great time.
And we have some exciting news for our seniors. On Monday, July 19th at 2 p.m. at Northend Church, we are going to be running an ice cream social. Now, our interns are going to be hosting this event for you seniors. We just want to thank you for all that you've done for us, and we just want to come together in community and enjoy some ice cream sundaes. So we hope to see you there.
And last but not least, Alan Klein-Dieters has been running an alpha group over Zoom. Now, we're already 1 week in, but I'm told that if you're still interested in joining, you can email Alan, A-L-L-E-N, at northendchurch.ca for more information about that. He'll hook you up. Alpha is a really interesting time. You can ask all sorts of questions about the faith. It's very interesting. I've done it myself. Very cool. So feel free to email Alan if that's something you're interested in.
Awesome. And kids, I wanted to mention one more thing. Stay tuned. If you're watching this online service right now, stay tuned for the end of the service for our Kids Church video for this morning. Let's get into the rest of our service.
Well, hey, Northend Church, I'm here with Allie Took, one of our interns. I mentioned earlier when we were just starting off the service that the auditorium smelled so delicious, and the going theory right now is it's because Allie had just vacuumed the auditorium, so all the bad smells were gone, all the good smells were there. That's the going theory. But hey, we just want to get to know some of the interns. So Allie, could you just tell me a little bit about how you came to faith in Christ?
Yeah, when I was about 10 years old, there was some tough stuff going on in my family life, but I really saw God work in a lot of ways and for miracles and healing, and although I didn't quite understand everything, I knew that it wasn't something to be ignored, so I dedicated my life to God, and yeah, in the past couple years especially, I've really felt and heard Him.
So Allie's pretty cool. I've known her for a couple years now, and I've said over and over again in the last year, I've seen her faith grow leaps and bounds. That's a compliment. I didn't tell you I was going to do that.
Thank you.
Anyways. So, Allie, let me ask you, who is Jesus to you?
Well, for me, I didn't grow up with a father that chose to love or be present in my life, but I never really felt as if I lacked in that sense because there was always kind of an undeniable feeling of like a parental embrace around me, and I didn't always understand it, but I know now that it was definitely Jesus Christ, and just always protecting and loving me. So that's who he's been to me. I've never been someone that I'm afraid of, always someone I can bring anything to.
Awesome. That's cool. So let me ask you one more question. You've been here working with the church for a couple weeks now. We've got you doing some stuff you're comfortable with, some stuff you're not comfortable with. What has God been teaching you just in the last couple weeks since you've been working here?
Yeah, so I was really close to not actually taking this job, and I'm so glad that God nudged me to do so, because I've really come to appreciate how each and every person here brings such unique gifts, and we all work together so amazingly and so naturally, and it just proves that truth that God has a plan and it's always working, and we don't always know what it's going to be, but yeah, things have gone so well, and I'm so grateful for this job.
Awesome. Allie, I like working with you. You can take jokes better than some people. That's why I give you a hard time sometimes. I think you're doing a great job.
Thank you.
Folks, enjoy the rest of the morning.
I'm sure you're encouraged like I am when you hear Allie sharing her story. Every one of us has a story, and God is writing on the canvas of our lives every day. And just before we pray together as a church family, I want to remind you that in the moments when it feels like the canvas is really black, we have this word from God. We find it in Hebrews chapter 13, and it says this: "So we can confidently say, because the Lord will never fail us or forsake us, the Lord is my helper. I will not fear what man can do to me." That's God's word, his promise for us today. I'd like to invite you to pray with me as we commit our situation, as we commit your situation to the Lord, and invite him, the master creator, to write his picture, to draw his picture, to create his picture in your life right now. Father, thank you that you're the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Thank you that in the days when it seems so black, you are just preparing the canvas for something even greater. And then in the darkness of the night, that you allow the stars to shine, the moon to shine. And so for those that are feeling overwhelmed by whatever life might be dishing out to them, may they know your presence. May the light of your love shine upon them. May they not doubt the fact that you are with them, that you will never fail or forsake them. So whether it's our young families in our church or the seniors in our church, Father, I pray for your blessing upon them. And especially over the summer, as we meet all our interns, we see how you're writing a very beautiful story in their lives. Oh God, that you would use them powerfully for your honor and for your glory. And so thank you. Thank you again for the story that you're writing here at Northend. And our prayer is that through all that happens, you would be glorified, you would be lifted up, and that people will discover you to be the friend who stays closer than even a brother. And we ask these things in the name of Jesus our Lord. Amen. You know, one of my favorite stories about adversity is about Chippy the parakeet. Now, Chippy was a wonderful bird, would sit in the cage and would sing beautiful songs all the time. And Chippy's owner just doted on him, so much so that the cage was always kept spotless. And on one particular day, the owner took the end off the vacuum cleaner and stuck it in the cage to clean up the debris at the bottom. You know, all the bird droppings, etc. But suddenly the phone rang, and in a moment she turned her head, and suddenly the vacuum moved with her hand. And guess what? Chippy got sucked up and just got, and Chippy was gone. Well, startled, the owner put down the phone and shut off the vacuum cleaner and did what anyone would do, opened up the vacuum cleaner and opened up the dirt bag, and there was Chippy, still alive, but covered in dirt and dust and certainly stunned. But being a caring owner, she took the bird quickly to the bathroom and opened up the water full on and washed the bird off. So sucked in, washed off, and the parakeet was just shaking with all the shock that was happening. And realizing her mistake, she pulled out the hairdryer and just blasted Chippy with hot air to dry him off, and hopefully so he would recover. The reporter who covered the story went back 3 days later to talk to the owner, and he said, "How's Chippy doing?" And the owner said, "Well, Chippy is sitting quite quietly. She doesn't sing anymore, very quiet, just looking out into space." And no wonder, wouldn't you? Wouldn't I? You know, you get sucked in, you get washed over, you get blown dry. And all of a sudden, it's because you were sitting there minding your own business and the bottom falls out of your cage. I hope that's not where you're at today, but maybe you can relate to Chippy. But I know this, that we get in those situations where the bottom of life just falls out of our cage and everything just seemed to be going along, we need hope. Jesus comes along and he speaks to all of us who encounter that moment. It's a moment when we just get overwhelmed with life. And he says this, "Blessed are they who mourn, for they shall be comforted." Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. What's hope got to do with it all? When we experience the comfort of God in the midst of our situation, it fills us with incredible hope. But the secret to finding that comfort, the secret to finding that hope is in mourning, is in being broken. Saying, what are you talking about? Can I suggest this thought? That healing hope comes when you experience a number of things, but it has to do with your tears. We're going to talk about 3 different kinds of tears, but let me just take you back and talk about a man who shed tears, a man who was broken. But before he was broken, he was full of himself. And that was the man we refer to as the Apostle Peter. Just before Jesus went to the cross, he is sitting there with the disciples and they're having a conversation about who is the greatest. And they're trading things back and forth, who has the greatest spot of influence in the kingdom and with the Lord himself. And in the midst of the conversation, Jesus looks to Peter and Peter says, "Lord, even if everyone else betrays you, I will not betray you. I will follow you." And Jesus makes that comment. He says, "Peter, before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. And Cora says, when Jesus was taken to the crucifixion scene, when he's on trial and is about to be put to death, the people there pointing the finger at Jesus looked and they saw Peter there and they say, "Weren't you with him?" And he curses and swears and says, "I don't know the man." 3 times that happened. And suddenly on the 3rd time, the rooster crowed. And it says that Peter went out and he wept bitterly. Why is that so important? Because that was the transformational point in his life. There's a place in our journey with Christ that if we're never broken, if we never weep over our sin, I don't believe we can truly be changed. We need to be touched with the reality that Jesus went to the cross to pay the price for my sin. And if I'm going to get help, if I'm going to experience the hope choice, I need to realize that I need to be broken for my sin. I need to be broken over the things that matter. There are different kinds of tears, and healing hope comes when you experience tears of remorse. That's the first kind, tears of remorse. You see, it's one thing to be spiritually poor and acknowledge it, but it's another thing to grieve and to mourn over your sin. Peter mourned over his sin of promising to do something, to be someone, and falling so far short and actually denying his Lord. Folks, can I ask you this question? Is there tears of remorse in your life for the things that you have committed in the past? You see, many times we point the finger at Christians and say, well, if that's a Christian, I don't want anything to do with him. And possibly, quite often, that is justifiable. But here's the deal. I believe our lives will change. I believe that there'll be something very attractional within us when we're truly broken, when we realize what Christ has done to set us free from our sin and from our past. But there also has to be not just tears of remorse, there needs to be tears of repentance. What do you pride yourself on? Have you ever grieved over your sin? Because if your sin has never caused you to grieve, As someone once said, possibly you've never dealt with it. And maybe that's why you're still in captivity to it. You see, tears are very interesting. And as we begin to think about tears, I believe that tears keeps us from realizing how attractive this world is. As we begin to mourn and weep, we realize that so much is blurred about what we see about life. Remember Jesus, he said, the thief comes to steal and kill and destroy. But I'm come that you might have life and have it abundantly. And when we come to a place of brokenness, we see life for what it is. That all that the world tried to offer on a silver platter really was tarnished. It really was a rusty old platter. Not only do tears keep us from, wanting to be attached so much to this world's goods, but you know what? Tears is what makes heaven desirable. I think of many of my friends who have gone into the presence of Jesus, and they've come to that point where they've just been open before God, and they realize, like, Lord, I want to be with you. Maybe the suffering they've been going through or the things that they've been holding on to, they realize they're really nothing. I heard recently about a man who was very broken because he said, I've got all this stuff and yet I'm sick and life is not going to last much longer for him. He was trying to hold on and to clutch things. But when we are broken before God, we realize that what he wants to give us is so much better than anything we've been holding on to. I remember Jesus himself, he spoke so often and he talked about the things that we treasure in life and what we need to be holding on to. And he says, where your treasure is, that's where your heart will be also. And then the beautiful picture is that there are tears of restoration. And that's what happened in this story with Peter. The story that I've been referencing. Peter wept. He mourned bitterly. He wondered, could Jesus ever receive me? Could he restore me? And I have good news if you're like that today, if you're wondering, would Jesus ever welcome you back? Jesus has a way of making trophies out of trash cans. He does that all the time. And there are tears of restoration. At the end of John's gospel, Jesus meets with Peter and they've had breakfast together. And Jesus looks at Peter. And Peter is looking at Jesus, the one who he had denied. Jesus is there with the nail prints still in his hands. And Jesus looks to Peter and he says, do you love me? And Peter says, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. He said, feed my sheep. Jesus says again, Peter, do you love me? And he uses that strong word of relationship, that soul love. And he said, Peter says, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And then the third time, Jesus says, Peter, do you love me? And Peter is broken. He said, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And he said, feed my sheep. 3 times Peter denied Jesus. And 3 times Jesus asked Peter the question, do you love me? And he restored him. He said, will you feed my sheep? And invited him to a higher calling. If you read the book of Acts, you realize that after this happened, probably about 30 to 40 days later, Peter preaches that powerful message at Pentecost, where over 3,000 people surrendered at that moment as they listened to Peter declare the incredible love of Jesus. You see, when it says, happy are they who mourn, for they will be comforted, it's not minimizing the problems that you go through. It's not minimizing the problems that I go through. It's realizing that in the midst of the journey of life, Jesus is there. And there are times when we are just broken. We say, Lord, here I come. Will you take me? Will you use me? Many times in my own journey, I've just felt, God, I failed you so much. But when I come to that place of brokenness and say, will you forgive me? Lord, I'm just like Peter. And maybe you're saying the same thing. I feel like as Jesus reaches out his hand and he says, I want you to rise up. It's so easy to be there and sit and just bemoan the situation and think we don't deserve what God has given to us. And you're right, but it's grace. And if grace had a price to it, it wouldn't be grace. It's a gift. It says, by grace we are saved through faith. It is the gift of God. God wants to give you a gift today when you come to that place of brokenness. And the place of brokenness of mourning is when you're saying, God, apart from you, I am nothing. You see, there are 3 things about God's character that give us hope in the midst of difficult situations. If we think about, blessed are they who mourn, for they will be comforted. Let me share them with you. The first thing about God's character that gives me hope is this: God knows about my situation. He knows about your situation. You might feel like that parakeet. You might feel like all of a sudden everything was fine and you just got sucked in. You feel like you've been washed over and now you've been blown dry and you're just kind of sitting now on the perch and you're feeling pretty stunned. You're thinking, does God know? Well, he does. Listen to Psalm 31, verse 7. It says, you have seen the crisis in my soul. And in Psalm 56, verse 8, the psalmist writes, you know how troubled I am. You have kept a record of my tears. Isn't that beautiful? The tears that you've shed, the time of pain when you thought no one was there. God is there. The psalmist knew this. Lord, he said, you've kept a record of my tears. And in the midst of your painful situation today, God wants to remind you that he is there with you, that he is more than enough. Do you remember the story of Joseph in the Old Testament? Thrown into prison for a crime that he didn't commit, left there to die. And yet it says an interesting little phrase as he was cast into prison, the Lord was with him. And the Lord is with you today. God knows about my situation. And I want you to know something else. God cares about your situation. So how do I know that? Well, listen to Psalm 103, verse 13. It says, he is like a father to us, tender and sympathetic. Oh, what an incredible discovery we have here when we realize not only does God know about my situation, but he cares about my situation. I think the problem we run into many times is we wonder, God, why does it take so long? We don't want to wait, do we? If I read the opening pages in the book of Exodus, the second book in the Bible, we read there how God had heard the cry of his people and he attended to it. And many times we need to be reminded that God hears your cry. He hears my cry. He is never in a hurry, but he is never late when he comes and brings his answer. And the psalmist said, I've learned to wait on the Lord. And he encouraged me, and he lifted me up out of a miry clay and placed my feet upon a rock. And he established my going. So not only does God know about my situation, he cares about my situation. And God can change me and my situation. Did you know that? He can change me. I might not enjoy the situation that I'm in, but I can say, Lord, will you give me your attitude? Will you give me your heart? I think of some of the people that have shared their story on this broadcast, and many of them are in difficult situations. They're like in hot water every day. They're in agony and they're in pain, but they're discovering that God is more than enough. And like the Apostle Paul, who was used to bring healing to many people, Paul himself was not healed of his physical ailment. And as he cried out to the Lord said, Paul, my grace is sufficient for you because my strength is made perfect in weakness. What an incredible truth if we allow it to wrap us and to hold us in the embrace that God intended for it to have for you and for me. You see, God can change me and my situation. This means that anyone who belongs to Christ has become a new person. The old life is gone and a new life has begun. 2 Corinthians 5, verse 17. Will you allow God to change you right now? Maybe to change your attitude? Because could it be that your attitude toward this situation is affecting your altitude? You're miserable. You're cantankerous. You're saying, I don't like this, and possibly rightfully so. But what if you chose to follow the example of the Apostle Paul, who said, in everything give thanks, for this is the will of God. You see, when we mourn, when we are broken over our sin, we realize our spiritual bankruptcy. We realize that apart from God, we are nothing. And in those moments of brokenness, the Lord is able to come and minister his peace and his grace and his comfort. Matter of fact, in the book of Corinthians, we read that God comforts us so that we can comfort those with the same comfort with which we have been comforted. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that good news? It gives me a perspective on my suffering, a perspective on my situation. I can share with you honestly today, there are things that I'm dealing with that I don't enjoy. There are things my wife has gone through that I didn't enjoy, like cancer and many other things. There are things my kids have gone through. There have been struggles that I have had. Sometimes words of people, maybe it's been situations, we've had to move on different occasions, we've had our life uprooted, but I have discovered this: the comfort of God is directly proportionate to the strength that He provides, because His strength is made perfect in weakness. And today we're going to talk in just a moment about a grievous problem in our country. Brian Stiller is with us, and he's going to be talking to us about why it's important for us to mourn as Canadians over what has happened in the residential schools. Because as we mourn, I believe that it's in that time of coming and saying, God, how do we react? How do we respond? We will hear the voice of God giving us a response of what He's calling us to do and the people that He is calling us to be. That's a huge issue, but there's also the individual issues that you're facing today. And I want you to know that as we sense brokenness in our own heart, it's out of that God brings us healing. He brings us hope, for hope is heaven's handle to hold on to in hard times. Well, I'm delighted today that Dr. Brian Stiller, who is the Global Ambassador for the World Evangelical Alliance, is back with us again. We did a radio program a few days ago, and I was profoundly impacted by what he shared, and I wanted Brian to come back and share it with you as well. So, Brian, thank you for being here today. Always glad that you're with us, and you're keeping well?
We're very well. Warm and enjoying the occasional rain, a great gift.
Well, Brian, part of your ministry takes you all around the world, and I know that COVID has kind of clipped your wings for a little bit, but you're still staying in touch with the global church. And just tell us in a sentence or two what all you're doing worldwide. And who is the World Evangelical Alliance?
There are three out of the 2.4 billion Christians, there are three major world Christian communities. The Vatican, the Roman Catholics, is about 1.2. The World Council, which includes the Eastern Orthodox, is about 500 million. And evangelicals comprise about 650 million Christians worldwide, which is about 25% of the world Christian population. The World Evangelical Alliance is not a Vatican to the evangelicals, but it's a global center. I serve as global ambassador. I travel to many countries, conferences. We're helping younger leaders write, that kind of thing.
Brian, you see so many amazing things happening, but you also see some of the difficulties that believers are going through and the atrocities in other countries. One would think that it would never happen in Canada, but we're dealing with a matter called the residential schools, and we're grieving with our Indigenous brothers and sisters. The subject strikes close to home for you. Talk to me about that first, before we talk about your global travels. Let's deal with Canada.
It is a subject of enormous grief and sorrow. I am a too late comer to the sorrowing of it, and I wonder why. I was raised in Saskatchewan in the 40s and 50s, which had a large Indigenous population, both full-blooded and part-blooded Indian. I was aware of them. They lived on reservations, most of them, at least I thought. There were some who lived in the city of Saskatoon and Regina, but they tended to be those who were struggling with the various forms of addiction and living in the more difficult, poorer areas of the city. But I never, in my history, in my learning, in my encounter, ever understood the depth of their history and their culture, their language, and their essential people. I didn't understand that. It was almost incidental to us. We were covered with a notion, a cultural bias towards the European community as being preeminent and thus should be the one that the culture assigns itself to. And there were, I didn't know of residential schools. Even though I lived in Saskatchewan, I don't recall ever hearing of them. It was something I learned of later. So we didn't have many friends who were Aboriginal, the odd person in school, but they generally were demeaned.
So as you think about what shaped you as you're growing up, how do you think we as Canadians, I mean, we've been shaped similarly. I had similar things, even though I didn't live in Saskatchewan. We thought of our Indigenous brothers and sisters in a demeaning way. How do we respond with the horrific things that we're reading about, the people that have been killed, the children that have been abused, violated, and their lives taken, how do we respond as Christians?
Well, let me just kind of finish my history. And when I was with the Evangelical Fellowship in the 90s, we realized that this was a growing issue. And so I remember we had a 3-day circle of about 8 or 12 people, and we listened to their stories just hour after hour. And it was so powerful hearing them as they told about being ripped away from their parents. And by them not being parented, they never knew what it was to parent. So they said, you talk about dysfunctional families. We never knew what family was because we were torn from our families. And so I began to understand and feel the depths of their sorrow, even though I suspect that at the best that was somewhat superficial. And so now we end up today.
And what do we do today? I mean, you told a story the other day about a gentleman who was taken from his family. Tell me that story. Tell our viewers that story.
He was 8 years of age, and the government official came out into the bush where they were living and literally took him from the family tent and took him to a residential school. And there he lived, frightened, alone, was not allowed to speak his language, could not use his various behaviors of native culture. He was sexually abused, and then he would go back for the summer with his parents. But then he was now foreign, and he was seeing his parents differently because he had been instructed that native Aboriginal indigenous people were inferior, and so he had this growing inferiority.
Wow!
And his father was broken. And he ended up on the city drunk, so dysfunctional, because he had been robbed of his rightful family, his rightful heritage. And we, as the European invaders, which we thought we were kind of refugees. We were people, migrants coming for a better land and building this land so it could become something, never realizing that we took people out of their abode, removed them from their sense of life and identity, and it gave them nothing in return. So today we are there, and as a person being born back in the early 40s in Saskatchewan, I ask myself today, am I responsible? Well, in a sense, I'm not. I'm not responsible for the government having done that. Now, you can argue with me, and I'm not prepared to spill a lot of blood on that battlefield because I could be wrong. But what I think I'm not wrong about is that today, if I don't own it, then I become complicit in that which went on. So if I'm not complicit because of my age, and I'm not complicit necessarily because I'm of a Swedish heritage, if I don't own what our country did, then in a sense, I am unpatriotic. I am rejecting the nature of our country, pretending it didn't and doesn't exist. And I live within a cocoon of my own choosing and my own self-interest today, keeping out from that cocoon the struggles and the sorrows and the deep pain of people today who look back onto their grandmothers and their great-grandmothers and great-grandfathers whose grave is in the shallow soil of those residential schools. And that suffering and pain is ripping at the heart. And somehow, as a white Canadian of many years standing, I have to accept complicity because of my heritage.
Brian, you've said so much. We got about 30 seconds. Can you give me a couple things to hold on to move forward? What would you say to the church? We have 30 seconds.
Open your heart and pray. I mean, deeply pray. Deeply pray.
Yeah.
Make friends of an Aboriginal. Read their books. There's some great books out there. Find ways of putting funds, your investment, into people and into ministries and into agencies that will help. And find a way to publicly declare your sense of sorrow with our brothers and sisters. That's the gospel. It's the Good Samaritan. It's the story. The two things we're told to do: love God, love your neighbor. This is neighbor love.
You've been listening to Dr. Brian Stiller, the Global Ambassador for the World Evangelical Alliance. Brian, thank you for sharing your heart and stirring mine as well. Thank you. So as we process the word that we've heard today, can I remind you, can I be your encourager that God does have a plan for you, that He loves you, that He is walking with you, and He is the ultimate source of our happiness, not in anything else that we turn to, but in Him alone. He wants to bring His healing, His hope, and His happiness in your life today. And so may God grant this to you by the power of His Holy Spirit. In Jesus' name, amen.
Hi, I'm Joanne.
And I'm Marshall, and I'm really excited to continue our series on training. This week, we're going to talk about how being disciplined and hard times can actually bring us closer to Jesus.
That's right. I don't think any of us ever look forward to being disciplined, but it also means it doesn't have to be a negative experience.
Absolutely. I remember in high school, my coach would always tell me to train more, practice more, which I felt like I couldn't spend time with my friends, but I realized he was just wanting me to be a better athlete.
I get that. When we're in that moment, we may not always see the value of being corrected or steered in the right direction, but we're going to look at it through the Jesus perspective and see what that means to us.
Absolutely. So let's watch this God story and see what that's all about.
What's the worst thing about throwing a party in space? You have to plan it. Hi everyone, it's Jen. I'm so glad to be back with you today. I want to start by sharing a story of a time when my parents told me not to do something and I did it anyway and it ended up not going well for me at all. So when I was younger, I owned a Game Boy. It was kind of like a gaming system and my parents always said never have liquid around electronics. I did not listen. So I was at a practice for a play that I was in and I was playing my Game Boy and I was also drinking a can of soft drink. And then it was my turn to go on stage, so I quickly put everything aside and I went up and I did my scene. When I came back, unfortunately, somebody had walked by and knocked the can of soft drink all over my Game Boy. It was inside, it was sticky, it wouldn't turn on, it was a mess. And when I started crying and showed my parents, they kind of looked at me and said, well, we told you so. And it was really quite a bummer. So when that happened to me, it really felt like the end of the world that my Game Boy didn't work anymore. And that leads me to today's big idea, that God can use difficulties to make us stronger. Now, I don't believe that God puts us in difficult situations, but when we find ourselves in them, I believe He is with us and He can use them to help make us stronger. So this series is set in the New Testament book of Hebrews. Hebrews is a really cool book because it goes back and highlights the story of God's special family and how Jesus changes everything. And what's awesome is that it's one of the best written books in the Bible, but we don't even know who wrote it. So in this series in particular, we're looking at Hebrews chapter 12. Now last time we did the first 3 verses, today we're going to pick up at verse 4. Let's read together. You struggle against sin, but you have not yet fought to the point of spilling your blood. Have you completely forgotten the word of hope? It speaks to you as a father to his children. It says, my son, think of the Lord's training as important. Do not lose hope when He corrects you. The Lord trains the one He loves. He corrects everyone He accepts as His son. Put up with hard times. God uses them to train you. He is treating you as His children. What children are not trained by their parents? God trains all His children. But what if He doesn't train you? Then you are not really His children. You are not God's true sons and daughters at all. The writer of Hebrews reminds us that we all struggle with sin, but we can't give up because of it. We are God's children, and God treats us as a loving parent treats their kids, which is amazing. Because God is the perfect parent, we can always trust that He has the best for us in mind. As God's kids, He loves us so much that He will help us learn from our mistakes so that we can become more like Jesus. Now, in what we just read, the writer of Hebrews is actually quoting from the Old Testament in a book called Proverbs. Let's read those verses together right now. My son, do not hate the Lord's training. Do not object when He corrects you. The Lord trains those He loves. He is like a father who trains the son He is pleased with. God loves us so much that He wants to correct us as His children. It looks like Him guiding us away from things that aren't the best for us, things like sin and selfishness. And that's something that may not always feel good. I mean, if you're doing something that you shouldn't be and then you have to turn and do the opposite thing, that's not always the most fun thing to be doing. And often there can be consequences of when we do things that aren't right. When we make bad choices that cause us to go through difficulties, God can use that to turn us around and make us stronger and bring us closer to Him. Think of it this way, if you were doing something that would cause you or someone else to get hurt, your parents would want to correct you. And God does the same thing. God wants to teach us how to live the very best way as His kids that He loves. That's pretty sweet. And that's one way that God can use difficulties to make us stronger. Well, friends, it was really great to be with you today. I will see you next time.
Quick, turn to the person next to you and answer the following questions before the time runs out. Sorry, man.
Question time! Fill in the blank. Hebrews 12 verse 6 says, "The Lord trains the one He likes, loves, or hears." When has a parent or guardian corrected you after making a mistake? How did you take it?
Game time! Mad Lab. How many times can you say the key verse before things get gooey? Say it with me. My child, think of the Lord's training as important. Do not lose hope when He corrects you. The Lord trains the one He loves. He corrects everyone He accepts as His child. Hebrews 12, verses 5 and 6. Get ready. 3, 2, 1, go!
I totally agree with what we heard. God never sits back and says, "I told you so." He loves us so much and He wants the best for us, and that is why He shapes us to live Jesus-centered lives.
Absolutely. Being disciplined can be hard, but we also experience hard times in life. Friends could move away, family members become sick, but that doesn't mean they're always bad. God can use those moments to help us strengthen and grow closer to Him.
That's so right. We're going to check in again with Rachel and Lee, who visited the Transcend Running Academy in Kenya. Now, if you remember last week, we learned that many children in Kenya live in poverty, and they don't have the advantages of public transport, parents dropping them off at school or after school activities. They literally walk or run wherever they need to go.
So we're going to watch this video and see how walking and running everywhere builds the stamina of these kids. Let's check it out.
Do you know what time it is, Rachel?
It's 5:30 in the morning.
It's 5:30 in the morning, and it is cold and dark, and we're about to go run for an hour.
Yay!
Lee and I are in Western Kenya on our way to visit a small training academy
that is trying to help a group of youth develop their extraordinary natural ability and give them a chance at becoming world champions.
We want to find out what is giving these youth from rural Africa a chance to succeed
and see what we can learn from their training.
That was the hardest thing I've ever done. So we're at the Transcend Running Academy, and we're about to go for a run.
It's amazing because the runners, they get to the camp, and then they run to get to the workout part, and then they run for the workout, and they run back to the camp, and then they're gonna run home after. Running is just part of their day.
To start the morning off, we had to run 3 kilometers just to get to the place where we'd actually be doing the training.
legs hurt a lot.
My legs are okay, it's my lungs. Get this off of me.
It was hard and long.
We just ran to the place where the actual workout is taking place, and we're already dead. Oh gosh, we're doing this, okay.
So we were doing a fartlek, which is when you kind of do interval training. You run really hard and then you get a break and then you run hard again. So we would run hard for about 1.5 kilometers and then you get a bit of a break and then you come back. Maybe we can wait till they come back and then go back with them the next time.
We fell behind really fast.
Really, really fast. I was really close to just walking, and that was their first ones. They're already going slow.
And they might do like 6 or 8 of those. We can't even do 2. I don't want to do it again.
Push it, Rachel. It's all about endurance and challenges and training.
Got to a point where I just like couldn't breathe and I was having a hard time focusing because my mind was just saying, stop, I want to stop, I don't want to go anymore, I just want to start walking, I want to fall down.
A lot of runners near the end will just tunnel vision and give it everything they have to the end, and that's kind of what I was trying to do.
I realized how hard it is and how hard these people work because right now my lungs feel like I was running outside in winter.
That was the hardest thing I've ever done, for sure.
I'd say I did about 1/4 of the workout, and I am in a lot of pain. So I can't even imagine the amount of dedication and perseverance that they would need to do workouts like this every single day.
Question time! What's the hardest thing you've ever had to do? What helped you get through it? What helped the runners get through their training?
Oh my gosh, I am so tired after watching that. I can certainly understand why Rachel and Lee were so exhausted before they even started their actual training. They had to run 3 kilometers just to get to the training camp. That's tough.
Absolutely, and what we see as hardship of having to run and walk everywhere is actually translating to these guys being world-class athletes.
So amazing. Let's break into our small groups now and see what that looks like in our lives.
See ya.